Today we're taking a look at an $80 pre-built keyboard, the MechLands Vibe75. It has some interesting things going on that got me curious to see what it offers, like a hot swappable rotary knob and LCD. MechLands did send these keyboards over for us to review, and while I do get to keep them, no money has changed hands and no one has been privy to this content prior to its upload, and all opinions do remain my own. And as always, links for everything seen in today's video will be down in the video's description. The included extras are fairly Spartan, but do include a standard USB-C cable and a rotary knob that's hot swappable to fit in place of the standard LCD in the top right corner. More on this later. The quick start guide is comprehensive in that it's written out in several languages, but it's quite small and some of the print would be challenging for some to read even with eyewear on. Perhaps they could have done with a physically larger page to allow the font to be larger as well. Our example is black and red with a handsome looking Evil Dolch inspired keycap design for the double shot PBT keycaps, which I have to confess are the nicest pre-built keycaps I've seen on any of our pre-builts this year, including the Lumen Key 65, a keyboard that cost $100 more than this one. What you see is what you get though, with no extra or novelty keycaps included and no other layout options available to the board. The stock switches are what they call a cream mint linear switch, and there's not a ton of info on them. No menu, no housing or stem specs, just an actuation distance of 2mm, bottom out of 3.6mm, actuation force of roughly 45 grams, and a bottom out force of roughly 50 grams. The main thing to know here is the stock lube is quite smooth, the spring feels like it has a rather slow force curve, requiring more upfront actuation force than one might expect for a switch rated for 50 grams. But they are also quite comfy to type with and don't really need intervention from the end user to sound or feel good. Sadly, you don't get any extras and can't buy any more as of filming, so $79 is what you get. But I would love to see these as a standalone purchase. Case design language is a basic ABS wedge with snap fit halves and embellished with an aluminum wraparound plate accented to match the color scheme of the keycaps. And it's kinda ruined with this gaudy MechLands logo on the side. This doesn't do what you think it's doing, and ultimately this is just taking what's otherwise an admittedly simple but still handsome, if not admittedly boy racerist design, and kinda cheapens it. Back to that aluminum surround though. It adds a touch of heft to the otherwise all ABS plastic construction, and in both of our samples features excellent anodizing quality, especially considering the price of this board. The surround can be removed on full board disassembly, but we'll explore in a bit why that's probably a bad idea. At the rear, we've got our USB-C port and mode switches for wireless and operating system selection. Port alignment is about as dead on as you could possibly make it. Yet another surprising point of initial quality, as other more expensive boards than this one have struggled to get this right in my inventory. Looking at you, ND75. Underneath, you've got flip-out feet for two different typing angles and a thin metal branding plate with all the critical info etched into the surface. This is all the branding the board needed, right here. Be careful when removing the plastic film on this, as one of my samples has a bit of it stuck between the case and plate now, and there's no way to really remove it without damaging something, as this info plate is glued to the case. The USB dongle is hidden directly in front of the rear left leg. Actually genius. Our killer app is the hot swappable corner of the PCB that enables the use of either a rotary knob or a small LCD. There's only one way you can plug anything in and have it work, so it's pretty easy to get this right, or to at least tell something isn't right. The rotary knob has an arrow underneath that should point at the rear of the case for the correct orientation, and is strictly for controlling volume. The screen has functions similar to other budget boards we've checked out that show you time, lock states, connectivity type, and an appropriately sized GIF. The best part is you don't even need to be in software to confirm a swap has been made. Just pull the module you don't want, insert the one you do, plug in the board, and you're good to go. As for the internals, I'm gonna go ahead and show those off to you, but I'm gonna go ahead and say right here, this is not a board that is very easily disassembled at all. You basically have to use something like an iFixit toolkit pick or a pick from a guitar or something like that, and work your way around the top edge of the case in order to separate the top and bottom cases from one another. This is also how you would get to the inside to service for replacing the battery or doing something with the aluminum surround, since there are two screws on the inside of the case that also hold this aluminum piece to the case. The problem, however, is as you can see in my sample here, even when I'm using soft plastic picks to work my way around the case, it still ends up marring the plastics pretty significantly right here. On top of that, you can see that the case doesn't quite close completely in this region anymore. This is because, unfortunately, in the process of trying to remove the top piece from the bottom, I ended up damaging one of the clips because everything was engaged so firmly in place. I would really love to see the design of this case tweaked ever so slightly to allow for more easier user serviceability, because remember, at some point you are going to need to get inside the case and at the very least replace the battery for wireless mode. Getting inside reveals the gasket mounting system and flex cop polycarbonate plate with prelude plate mount stabs, as well as the PE and PET sheets and stock 1.2mm meme cut PCB. In the context of the full build, this PCB does nothing of substance for the board other than requiring some foam to retain structural integrity. I'm honestly not surprised to see it here, but I remain disappointed every single time I see it. The fact is, these kinds of assemblies are inexpensive to produce and remain popular in Eastern markets where these boards are manufactured in the first place. Underneath the PCB is a layer of case foam with SMD cutouts and silicone that covers the battery and proprietary daughter board, as well as a spot for a second battery. Yet another reason why I'm sad it's not easier to open the board for servicing, since even the daughter board has accommodations to add in a second battery. And as mentioned earlier, eventually, this one will need to be replaced. This potentially becomes e-waste if the case breaks during assembly, and I really need to see less of that at this end of the industry. The stock board is quite deep and very foam driven in sound, lacking the sort of brightness we've been seeing in other foamed keyboards recently. Your mileage may vary as to whether or not you prefer that. I only remove the case silicone for the custom build since the assembly gets a touch thuddy and, as mentioned before, does need film to maintain structural integrity with all of the flex cuts, but it did still complement our brighter switches and double shot ABS keycaps. I also generally like the added ease with which bounce happens in the typing assembly. It feels a lot more comfortable and dropped a bit of weight, which, in the context of wireless, makes this better suited to being a travel companion in terms of weight. But that's not to say the stock board lacks bounce or is overly heavy. It feels more like the foam is exactly touching the silicone at stock, allowing for more even compression and softness. Of course, with the difficulties associated with opening this case, I can't recommend opening it one way or another, so if brighter is what you want, this ain't it. But if you want something that's deep and foam driven, this might actually do it for you. The software is what it is, much like a lot of what we've seen before, and like those other keyboards, won't overwrite the inbuilt function layer commands, so reassigning function layers will require the key to not already be in use. By far the strangest thing about this keyboard is its behavior with cables other than the stock one. With two different cables in my inventory, one now confirmed to be problematic and the other being fine, this keyboard tends to struggle with its low power states, leading the board to stop being recognized by my PC while also not throwing any messages up anywhere in Event Viewer. If I use the stock cable or use any of the wireless modes, the board behaves as per normal. So keep in mind, you will want to use the stock cable with this keyboard or else something that is very similar in design. Full transparency on this bit, I'm not honestly sure what could be causing this issue, and given my time constraints right now, there's a possibility I may not get the chance to revisit this particular phenomenon, but your mileage may vary, and I do encourage you to comment down below if you're an owner of Vibe75 who's had experiences one way or another with using cables other than the one that came with your keyboard. So there's definitely things about this keyboard that don't hit quite right from an enthusiast perspective, and ultimately that's our core audience here, enthusiasts. It's clear, however, there are lessons this board is taking from the enthusiast space in the excellent stock keycaps and switches, as well as the clever use of different materials to add heft and substance to a design that would otherwise have been more of the same, as well as features that would make just about any user happy. But those stand in stark contrast to a design that is too difficult to open for user serviceability and tuning, gaudy external branding, and a design that, for better or worse, requires at least some of the foam to be used properly. Vibe75 is trying to maintain a hard balance, and while it could certainly be argued that for a mere $10 to $20 more, you can get into a subjectively better keyboard, when you're dealing with spending choices at this end of the pricing spectrum, there may be harder budgetary constraints to overcome, and ultimately, you could endlessly justify spending slightly more here or there until you're at the point you're considering a Norbauer keyboard for your gaming setup. It's certainly challenging to provide what I would consider a better overall typing experience than this, at this price, with this initial build quality and feature set in mind. Vibe75 definitely has some user serviceability concerns I'd like to see addressed, and this definitely won't set an enthusiast's hearts on fire, especially with the cheesy branding on the side. But for the price, it's honestly kind of hard to beat. Take care of yourselves and one another, and we'll see you all in the next video.